Hey everyone, this is Ziki here. All right, so yesterday was the 25th of May, which is Africa Day. We saw Julius Malema leading EFF in marching to the French embassy in South Africa, where they handed over a memorandum calling upon France to withdraw completely from Africa. However, we saw that the French officials were refusing, they were not really keen on coming out, but they had to change their decision after Julius Malema told them that they were not going anywhere, and he was ordering the followers of EFF to block the gates and to block the road so that these officials could not go away. So later on, we saw them coming out there to receive the memorandum. However, they refused to sign it, and also the representatives say that they also have their issues to address in terms of this memorandum, and they said they were not going to sign because the memorandum doesn't belong to them; it belongs to the EFF. Now let's just listen to what the leader had to say.
Partners, let's give the ambassador an opportunity to acknowledge the receipt of your memorandum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good day to everyone. I want to say that we respect the EFF as a political movement. Also, I think you are very good organizers. You came to see us today, so it was normal to come out and to receive your memorandum. We cannot sign the memorandum because it's your memorandum, but we will convey the memorandum to Paris. And also, I want to say an important message, that we have our disagreement, okay? And today, France is a partner with Africa, and we are friends of the African nations. Thank you very much.
Amanda! Amanda! Down with France, down! Down with the imperialist France, down! All manifestations of colonialism and neo-colonialism in the entire African continent. We, as a generation of freedom fighters, reject and condemn the fact that decades after the declaration of so-called independence of former colonized territories, colonizers continue to maintain a colonial and neo-colonial relationship with African countries which are supposed to be free from colonial control. The British colonizers, the Portuguese colonizers, the Belgian colonizers, the Spanish colonizers, and all the French colonizers continue to brutally exploit, oppress, and micromanage all countries they colonized many decades ago. French colonialism in the African continent continues to be the most brutal, cruel, and devilish form of colonialism in the African continent. When countries that were under French colonial rule declared political independence, the government of France destroyed and damaged all the infrastructure and the systems that were developed through African resources and labor power because they wanted to retain total control of all the former colonies. The French colonial governments destroyed everything they were unable to loot back to their country after independence. The French colonialists banned food, killed cows, and destroyed buildings and books. The former colonies of the French regime, such as Gabon, Mali, Niger, Senegal, Benin, Togo, Burkina Faso, Congo Brazzaville, Ivory Coast, Chad, Central African Republic, Equatorial Guinea, Cameroon, and Guinea-Bissau continue to use the franc currency, and their monetary policy are dictated by the French Central Bank. France continues to maintain strong and intimidating military bases in almost all African countries they had colonial control over. African countries that were under French colonial rule are forced to pay colonial taxes and currently paying more than 500 billion US dollars to the French treasury every year. And that is separate from the many natural resources French companies continue to loot from the African continent. The colonial pact that France forced all its former colonies to enter into include the following: paying for the infrastructure France built during colonization, keeping 50% of their foreign reserves in the French treasury. 14 African countries have been doing this for years. Interestingly, these countries can only access 15% of their reserves each year. If they need more, they have to borrow it from France. France has the first right to purchase any natural resources discovered. French companies have the first right to choose on all government procurement tenders. Senior military officers are trained in France. France has the right to deploy its military in the African countries. Countries have to make French the official language and the education language, using the French colonial currency. Former colonies have to send a reserve report to France. Ex-colonies cannot enter into military alliances with other countries without approval from France. Ex-colonies are required to join forces with France during war or global crisis. The French government and regime have played a direct role in the coup d'etat and illegal and unlawful overthrow of many governments in the African continents. France is also responsible for the assassination of many prominent leaders in the African continent. Additionally, France continues to support and anchor nonsensical governments that have no respect for African people. This includes the following: Burkina Faso, which led to the assassination of Thomas Sankara; Guinea, Central African Republic, Chad. Mali's instability has always been sponsored by France. Ivory Coast illegal arrest of leaders and instability sponsored by France. The continued rulership of Paul Biya in Cameroon is financed and maintained by France. The permanent and perpetual destabilization of the Democratic Republic of Congo is aided by the French government. We commend and appreciate the work of revolutionary anti-colonial forces that are beginning to undermine French colonialism, particularly in Mali, and call on all neo-colonized people under the so-called Francophone to reject France's colonial rulership and control. We commend the many anti-colonial and pan-Africanist forces in all the African countries and reiterate our call for the unity of the African continent. Despite the micromanagement of the former colonies, the French government continuously uses its resources to corruptly influence the internal processes of electoral outcomes of Africa's continental organizations, such as the African Union and the Pan-African Parliament. France continues to identify puppets in different African countries and field them as candidates for important and strategic positions in different continental multilateral organizations. The economic freedom fighters, therefore, stands here in front of the embassy of the slave traders, the colonialists, the warmongers, and the imperialists to make the following demands. France must grant full independence to all African countries and allow them to determine their own currencies, monetary policies, and economic direction. France must stop all colonial taxes because it is the wealth of the African continent, the blood and sweat of Africans that build all infrastructure which African countries are forced to pay for many decades after the so-called independence. France must immediately remove all its military bases which is currently stationed in Africa. These include, but is not limited to, military bases, French soldiers, French aid through arms, and any presence of French influence in the armies or militia groups in Africa. France must desist from interfering in the economic affairs of African countries through monetary policy and the use of their currency in West Africa must gradually decrease towards establishing currency system determined by Africans themselves. France must return all mineral and fiscal reserves held by the French treasury to African nations and any of their former colonies. France must pay reparations to all of its former colonies, particularly the architect of the greatest slave rebellion known to humanity, Haiti. Haiti has had its development reduced by racist global world order, which feared African independence and the first black-led state. The removal of French as an official language in Africa in favor of continental reconstruction of African identity, away from imposition of white civilization standards and norms as a measure of humanity. France must stop its sponsorship of divisions that occur in Africa's continental multilateral institutions, particularly the Pan-African Parliament and the African Union. These demands are made to the government of France and sent to all colonial and neo-colonial forces in the African continent, including the United Kingdom, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Belgium, Germany, and the United States of America. All forms and manifestation of colonialism in the African continent must be dismantled. It is our obligation as a generation to work fearlessly to dismantle colonial and neo-colonial rule. The EFF will do everything in its power to destabilize all forms of colonialism in the African continent and will play an unapologetic and leading role in the dismantling of all remnants of colonialism and colonial rule in the African continent. We stand on the shoulders of great anti-colonialists, Pan-Africanists such as Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, Emperor Haile Selassie, Mandela, Thomas Sankara, and many others. The EFF expects a response to all these demands within 14 working days. If there is no believable and practical response within the 14 days, we will, as the leadership of the EFF, outline a clear and practical program on how we will undermine and counter the French continued colonialism of the African continent. I thank you. Amanda! Amanda! Comrades, we are here to hand over this memorandum to the embassy of France, which must be taken directly to the government of France. We now call the representatives of the embassy to come and sign the memorandum and acknowledge receipt of the memorandum. Down with imperialist America, down! Down with the imperialist Spain, down! Down with the imperialist Belgium, down! Down with the imperialist Italy, down! Amanda! Amanda! Down with the colonizer Britain, down! Down with the colonizer Britain, down! So fighters, when we say we don't want France in Africa, it doesn't mean we want Britain in Africa. It doesn't mean we want Spain in Africa. It doesn't mean we want Italy in Africa. They must all follow each other with their tail in between their legs, leaving our continent of Africa, because Africa belongs to Africans. So fighters, you must not be shaken. You saw today we just undermined a white supremacy. This is the ambassador who was refusing to get out and said the protocol of France doesn't allow him to get out. I had to leave the truck to go and fetch him. This is not France, come here. This is Africa. You will do what the Africans are doing. So comrades, we must continue to fight for the unity of our continent. We must never be divided. We must never allow France to divide us. We must never allow Britain to divide us. We must be one thing against the colonizers and the imperialists. When you see an African, whether he's speaking French or speaking English, you must know that we borrowed colonial language so that we can hear each other, because they destroyed our own languages. We must build our own continental language so that when we speak to each other, we don't have to use their colonial language. Swahili is one such example that is spoken in many other countries. When we say, let's make Swahili one language, comrades in Nigeria say, no, our language is spoken by more people because we are men. We say, no, it's spoken by more people but in one country. Swahili might be spoken by fewer than your people, but is spoken in different countries. Therefore, it is the basis within which we can start to build a continental language. Once we have a continental language, we can communicate without imperialists hearing us. That is the beginning of the unity of Africa, which is a threat to France and Britain. Fighters, we must make sure that the resources and the land of Africa is returned into the hands of Africans, because that's what they want here in Africa. They don't want us, but they want our resources. They say we are poor. How can we be poor when we come from a rich continent of Africa where all of them have moved into? We never moved to their countries. They moved to us because we've got what they don't have, and that is richness. And they are fighting for our resources. We need the unity of Africa to defeat the French currency, to defeat the American currency, build a strong currency of Africa based on gold and diamond and platinum and all the resources of Africa, both natural and mineral resources of our beautiful continent. There is no room in South Africa and the whole of African continent for xenophobia. Anyone who preaches xenophobia is a spy of the French embassy and the British embassy. They are working for foreign agents to divide the people of Africa. When you see a fellow African, you must see yourself. And in that way, we will unite and defeat colonialism and imperialism. We must also defeat capitalism. That's why it's important to identify progressive organizations in Africa that are fighting for socialism. Because there are a lot of people who say they are fighting for freedoms in other African countries, but they are sponsored by the French and the British. We don't take money of the French. We don't take money of the British. We don't take any foreign money, but African money we take because it's our money. It's not a foreign money. Africa is one country, and therefore we must always treat each other like that. Fighters, what you did today in solidarity with the people of Chad, with the people of Mali, with the people of 12 countries, which are still exploit Western African countries that are exploited by France, is highly appreciated. You are here today to make history. Some fool can say to you, why are you marching against France? You have nothing to do with France. We have everything to do with France, because France is at the center of the division of the African continent and the exploitation of the resources of Africa. That's why we are here. The pain of Western Africa is a pain of Southern Africa. We are not free until those 12 countries reclaim their reserve banks and run their own currency as independent countries. Then we will be free. What type of independence is this? Where they say you are independent, but you don't have your reserve bank. But for every reserve, you must pay 50% to France. And you can only borrow 15%. You can only take 15%. More than that, you must go and beg for your own money to be released in France. That's what France is doing to African people. That barbarism must be stopped. And it can be stopped by the unity of Africa. The Mali comrades, when they fight there and demand France to leave, the people of South Africa should join the people of Mali and march France out of Mali. So fighters, we thank you for your discipline. We thank you for your dedication. We thank the leadership of Tshwane that in the last 2 occasions, you have always come to the party and you never disappointed. Let's continue to build an organization in Tshwane, door to door, house by house, street by street, factory by factory, school by school, university by university. There should not be any corner in Tshwane without a member of the EFF.